What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a daytime talk show and refuses to play by the rules? In just 33 seconds, a single comment would turn a friendly interview into the most shocking moment in daytime television history. Denzel Washington arrived at the View studio that morning, the same way he approaches everything in life, with quiet confidence and grace. The audience erupted in applause as he walked onto the set, flashing that trademark smile that has lit up movie screens for decades. He settled into his chair, exchanged pleasantries with the panel, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Nobody in that studio could have predicted what was about to unfold. The conversation started innocently enough. The host asked about his latest film, his family, his career spanning over 40 years in Hollywood. Denzel answered each question with a kind of thoughtful wisdom that has made him not just a great actor, but a role model to millions. He spoke about hard work, dedication, and the importance of faith in his life. The audience hung on his every word. But then Joy Behar leaned forward in her chair, and the temperature in the room shifted. "You know, Denzel," she began, her tone dripping with condescension, "it must be nice living in your little bubble. All that success, all that money. Do you even understand what real Americans are going through?" The audience fell silent. You could feel the tension crawling across the studio. Denzel's smile faded just slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I think I understand more than you might realize," he said calmly. "I came from nothing. My mother was a beautician. My father was a preacher. I know what struggle looks like." Joy waved her hand dismissively, actually waved it like she was shooing away a fly. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "That was decades ago. You've been rich and famous for so long, you've probably forgotten what it's like to worry about paying bills or putting food on the table." The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Whoopi Goldberg looked down at her notes. Sarah Haynes cleared her throat. Even they could sense that Joy was crossing a line, but nobody stopped her. Denzel took a deep breath. His jaw tightened just slightly, a tiny crack in that famous composure. "With all due respect," he said, and you could hear the steel underneath those polite words, "I still remember every single struggle. I remember my mother working 2 jobs. I remember wearing hand-me-down clothes. I remember going to bed hungry sometimes." Success doesn't erase your past. It just gives you a platform to help others avoid the same struggles. "How noble," Joy shot back, her voice thick with sarcasm. "The rich celebrity wants us to think he's still one of us. Tell me, when was the last time you actually spent time with regular people? Not at some charity event where you show up for photos, but really spent time with them?" "I spend time with regular people every day," Denzel replied, his voice steady, but you could hear the edge creeping in. "My family, my friends, people in my church community. I don't live in some ivory tower, if that's what you're suggesting." Joy leaned back and crossed her arms. "Your church community," she repeated mockingly. "Of course. Let me guess. You're going to tell us all about how God blessed you, and if people just pray hard enough, they'll be successful too?" The audience gasped. Several people actually gasped out loud. Even in a culture where everything gets debated and nothing is sacred, directly mocking someone's faith on live television was shocking. Denzel's expression changed. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by something harder, something that demanded respect. "My faith is not a joke," he said quietly, but his voice carried across that studio like thunder. "My faith got me through times when I had nothing. My faith gave my mother strength to keep going when she was exhausted. My faith keeps me grounded when this industry tries to tell me I'm more important than I am. You can disagree with my beliefs. That's your right, but you will not disrespect them." Joy laughed. She actually laughed. "Oh, here we go. The religious lecture. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You Hollywood types love to preach at the rest of us about morality and faith. Meanwhile, you're making $20 million a movie." "I never claimed to be perfect," Denzel said, and now his voice was rising. Not shouting, but rising with barely controlled frustration. "I never said having money makes me better than anyone else. But you're sitting here on your talk show, making millions yourself, and you have the audacity to lecture me about being out of touch?" "I'm a journalist," Joy snapped back. "I'm supposed to ask tough questions. Or do you only like interviews where people kiss your feet and tell you how wonderful you are?" "There's a difference between tough questions and disrespect," Denzel fired back. "You're not interested in a conversation. You invited me here to belittle me, to mock my faith, to try and make yourself look clever at my expense." The audience started murmuring. Some people were nodding in agreement with Denzel. Others looked shocked at the confrontation unfolding before them. The producers in the control room were probably losing their minds. Joy's face flushed red. "You're being overly sensitive," she said, using that infuriating tone people use when they want to dismiss someone's legitimate concerns. "If you can't handle a little pushback, maybe you shouldn't do interviews." "Pushback?" Denzel repeated, and now he was leaning forward in his chair. "You haven't pushed back on anything I've said. You've just been rude. There's a difference." "I am not rude," Joy insisted, her voice getting louder. "I'm direct. I say what everyone else is thinking but is too afraid to say." "No," Denzel said firmly. "You say what you think makes good television. You create conflict because that's your brand. But you don't get to disguise disrespect as honesty." Whoopi finally tried to intervene. "Let's take a breath here," she said, holding up her hands. "We're all adults. We can have a civil conversation." But Joy wasn't done. "Civil?" she said, turning to Whoopi before looking back at Denzel. "He comes on our show and gets offended when I ask him real questions. How is that my fault?" "You haven't asked me a single real question," Denzel shot back. "You've made assumptions about who I am, what I believe, and how I live my life. And when I try to correct those assumptions, you mock me." "Because your answers are typical celebrity nonsense," Joy said, waving her hand again in that dismissive gesture. "God bless me. I remember where I came from. I'm still humble. We've heard it all before." Denzel stood up. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Standing up in the middle of an interview is television language for "this is over." Everyone knew what it meant. "You know what?" Denzel said, his voice calm again but filled with quiet power. "I came here today as a guest. I agreed to this interview because I thought we'd have an actual conversation. But you're not interested in conversation. You're interested in making yourself feel superior." "Sit down," Joy said, but her voice wavered slightly. Even she seemed surprised by this turn of events. "We're not finished." "Yes, we are," Denzel said firmly. "I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be disrespected on television. I've spent 40 years building a career based on dignity and respect, and I'm not going to compromise that for your ratings." "You're being ridiculous," Joy said, trying to regain control. "This is what we do here. We have debates. We challenge our guests. If you can't handle it, that says more about you than it does about me." Denzel shook his head slowly, a sad smile crossing his face. "You really believe that, don't you?" he said. "You really think there's no difference between challenging someone and being cruel? That's sad. That's genuinely sad." He started to remove his microphone. His hands were steady, controlled. This wasn't an emotional explosion. This was a man making a deliberate choice, a choice based on principle. "Denzel, come on," Whoopi said, trying once more to smooth things over. "Let's just restart this conversation. We can move on to other topics." But Denzel shook his head. "I appreciate that, Whoopi," he said respectfully. "I really do. But I can't sit here and pretend that what just happened is okay. It's not okay to mock someone's faith. It's not okay to make assumptions about someone's character based on their success. And it's not okay to disguise insults as journalism." Joy stood up now too, her face even redder than before. "You're making a huge mistake," she said, and now there was real anger in her voice. "Walking off this show will not make you look good. People will think you can't handle criticism." "Let them think what they want," Denzel said calmly. "I know who I am. I know what I stand for. And I know I don't have to tolerate being treated this way. Not by you, not by anyone." "This is unbelievable," Joy said, throwing her hands up. "You Hollywood elites are all the same. The moment someone questions you, you run away." "I'm not running," Denzel corrected her, his voice strong and clear. "I'm making a choice. There's a difference. Running is when you're scared. I'm not scared of you. I'm just done with this conversation." The other host sat frozen. The audience was completely silent now, watching this historic moment unfold. People had their phones out, recording every second. This was going to be everywhere within minutes. Denzel placed his microphone on the chair and straightened his jacket. "I want to be clear about something," he said, addressing the audience now rather than Joy. "I don't regret coming here today. I believe in having difficult conversations. I believe in respecting different viewpoints. But respect has to go both ways. You can disagree with someone without being disagreeable. You can challenge someone without being cruel. And you can ask tough questions without mocking their fundamental beliefs." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Denzel held up a hand. "I'm not finished," he said, and the authority in his voice stopped her cold. I've been in this industry a long time. I've been interviewed thousands of times. I've faced tough questions, criticism, controversy. I've never walked off a set before. Never. But there's a first time for everything, and today is that day. You're being a child, Joy spat out. This is childish behavior. No, Denzel said, shaking his head. What's childish is insulting your guest and then acting surprised when they don't want to stay. What's childish is hiding behind the excuse of journalism when you're really just being mean. What's childish is refusing to take responsibility for your own behavior. The silence in that studio was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. Every single person there knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would be talked about for years to come. I have spent my entire career trying to be a role model, Denzel continued, his voice filled with emotion now, trying to show young people, especially young black men, that you can be successful without compromising your values, that you can achieve your dreams without losing yourself, that you can stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm standing up. I'm walking away from a situation that doesn't serve me, that doesn't respect me, that doesn't reflect my values. You're making this about race now? Joy asked incredulously. I didn't make this about anything, Denzel replied. I simply stated a fact. I'm a black man in Hollywood, and yes, that shapes my experience. That shapes how I move through the world. But this isn't about race. This is about respect, something you clearly know nothing about. Joy's mouth fell open. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. Denzel turned to the audience. Thank you all for being here today, he said graciously. I'm sorry you had to witness this. I'm sorry this interview went the way it did, but I hope maybe it teaches something valuable. You don't have to accept mistreatment. You don't have to smile and nod when someone disrespects you. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to demand better. The audience started clapping. It started with just a few people, then more joined in, and within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, giving Denzel a standing ovation. They were applauding him for walking off the show, for standing up for himself, for refusing to be bullied on live television. Joy looked around in disbelief. She was losing control of her own show, her own audience. This is ridiculous, she muttered, but her voice was drowned out by the applause. Denzel smiled at the audience, waved, and then turned toward the exit. But before he left, he turned back one more time. Joy, he said, and his voice was almost gentle now. I hope someday you understand the difference between being provocative and being kind, between being honest and being hurtful, between making good television and making good choices. I genuinely hope you learn that. And with those final words, Denzel Washington walked off the View set. The cameras followed him as he moved through the studio, past the crew members who were staring in shock, past the producers who were frantically talking into their headsets, past everyone and everything, and out the door. The studio erupted into chaos. The audience was still applauding. The other hosts were talking over each other, trying to make sense of what just happened. Joy was standing there, red-faced and furious, arguing with someone off camera. But Denzel was gone. He had made his point, stood his ground, and left with his dignity intact. He didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't throw anything, or make a scene. He simply refused to participate in his own disrespect, and in doing so, he created one of the most powerful moments in television history. Because here's what made this so extraordinary. Denzel Washington is beloved. He's respected across political lines, across racial lines, across every demographic you can imagine. He's the kind of celebrity that even people who don't watch movies know and admire. He's earned that respect through decades of excellent work, charitable giving, and living his values publicly without being preachy about it. So when someone like that, someone with that kind of reputation and character, decides to walk away from an interview, people pay attention. When someone that measured, that thoughtful, that careful about his public image decides that enough is enough, it means something. It sends a message. And the message was crystal clear. You can be successful, you can be famous, you can be wealthy, and you still deserve to be treated with basic human respect. Your beliefs matter, your dignity matters, your boundaries matter. And when someone crosses those boundaries, you have every right to remove yourself from the situation, regardless of what anyone else thinks. The audience in that studio understood it. They didn't applaud because they thought Denzel was being dramatic or making good television. They applauded because they recognized truth. They recognized a man standing up for himself in a world that constantly tries to tear people down. They recognized courage. Because make no mistake, walking off that set took courage. Denzel knew the headlines that would follow. He knew the think pieces that would be written. He knew that some people would criticize him, would call him sensitive or say he couldn't take the heat. He knew all of that, and he did it. Anyway, that's what principles look like. That's what integrity looks like. It's not about always being comfortable or always being liked. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Joy tried to continue the show. She tried to laugh it off, to make jokes about how sensitive celebrities are, to spin the narrative in her favor. But you could see it in her eyes. She knew she had gone too far. She knew that in a battle between her and Denzel Washington, the public would side with him every single time. And they did. The other hosts tried to move on to the next segment, but the energy was gone. The show was essentially over the moment Denzel walked out that door. Everything that followed was just going through the motions. In the control room, the producers were dealing with a nightmare. They had just lost one of the biggest stars in Hollywood in the middle of a live interview. They had footage of their own host essentially bullying a beloved guest until he had no choice but to leave. They knew this was going to be everywhere, and they knew how it would be perceived. But here's the thing, they couldn't bury it. It was live television. Thousands of people watched it happen in real time. Within minutes, clips were spreading across social media. Within an hour, it was trending worldwide. Within a day, it was all anyone could talk about. And the consensus was nearly universal. Denzel was right. Joy was wrong. The man had been disrespected, mocked, and belittled. And he responded with grace and strength. He didn't lose his temper. He didn't resort to insults. He simply stated his boundaries and enforced them. That's power. Real power. Not the fake power of having a talk show or being on television or having a platform. The real power that comes from knowing yourself, trusting yourself, and being willing to stand alone if necessary. Denzel Washington demonstrated that day what he's been demonstrating his entire career. That success is nothing without character. That fame means nothing without integrity. That all the accolades and awards and achievements in the world don't matter if you lose yourself in the process. He showed that you can be kind without being a pushover. You can be respectful without being a doormat. You can turn the other cheek without letting people walk all over you. There's a difference between forgiveness and enabling bad behavior. The audience that day, the people in that studio, and the millions watching at home, they saw all of that. They saw a masterclass in dignity. They saw what it looks like when someone refuses to compromise their values for anything. Not for ratings, not for publicity, not for money, not for anything. And Joy, she learned a hard lesson that day. Or at least, she should have. The lesson that you can't treat people however you want just because you have a microphone. That being provocative doesn't give you license to be cruel. That there are real consequences for disrespecting people, especially when you disrespect someone as universally beloved as Denzel Washington. But beyond the specific people involved, this moment taught something bigger. It taught that we all have the right to walk away. From jobs that don't respect us, from relationships that demean us, from situations that diminish us. We have the right to say no more and mean it. Too often, people stay in situations that hurt them because they're worried about what others will think. They're worried about being seen as weak or difficult or sensitive. But real strength is knowing when to stay and when to go. Real strength is valuing yourself enough to demand better treatment. Denzel valued himself that day. He valued his faith, his character, his dignity, and he valued them enough to walk away from a situation that threatened all three. That's not weakness. That's not sensitivity. That's wisdom. The standing ovation he received as he walked out wasn't just applause for a celebrity. It was applause for every person who has ever been disrespected and felt powerless. It was applause for every person who has wanted to walk away from a toxic situation but felt trapped. It was applause for the courage to choose yourself, even when it's hard. In that moment, Denzel Washington wasn't just an actor or a celebrity. He was a symbol of self-respect, of dignity, of refusing to accept mistreatment no matter who it comes from. And that symbol resonated with millions of people who saw themselves in his situation, who had felt dismissed and mocked and belittled. He gave them permission to stand up for themselves. He showed them what it looks like. Not with anger or violence or vengeance, but with calm, measured, dignified resistance. With a simple refusal to participate in your own degradation. That's the real story here. Not the drama, not the conflict, not the viral moment. The real story is about knowing your worth and living accordingly. about drawing lines and maintaining them, about respecting yourself enough to walk away when respect isn't reciprocated. Denzel Washington has played many roles in his career: heroes and villains, soldiers and civilians, real people and fictional characters. But that day on The View, he wasn't playing anyone. He was just being himself, and that turned out to be his most powerful performance of all.